If you are a small group facing an empire with 10 times your resources, fighting fair is a guaranteed way to lose. To survive, you have to throw out the old rulebook entirely. This map highlights central India's Deccan Plateau in orange. Its steep, rocky mountain ranges form a massive, natural defensive fortress. The people within this fortress shared something powerful: the Marathi language. This connected an otherwise scattered population through common words and poetry. This diagram breaks down the Bhakti movement from the 7th to 17th centuries. Notice the input on the left, translating complex Sanskrit texts into everyday Marathi. The output was that teachings reached the masses directly, bypassing rigid social hierarchies and instilling cultural pride. When you take a deeply rugged, hard-to-invade physical environment and populate it with people who share a language and a sense of unified identity, you have the ideal conditions for a rebellion. This diagram provides an overview of a teenager named Shivaji from the Bhonsle clan. By 16, he managed his family's land grant in Pune. He also developed a specific vision, shown in the bottom right, Swaraja, translating to complete, independent self-rule. Growing up, he watched the common people endure heavy taxation, destroyed crops, and constant violence as rival Deccan sultanates fought over the region. That intense suffering convinced him that true security required taking absolute control of their own borders. Look at this map. Instead of trying to build a massive standing army right away, his very first military strategy focused on geography. He systematically identified and captured a radial network of neglected, unoccupied hill forts surrounding the Pune region. This photograph captures the physical reality of the Western Ghats. These mountains feature sheer vertical drops and flat plateaus at the top. Placing a few soldiers and supplies up there makes them nearly impossible to dislodge. By securing these high-altitude positions first, a small force could observe enemy movements from miles away and dictate exactly where and when a battle would happen. Look at this comparison table. The Mughal Empire relied on heavy, slow-moving columns designed for drawn-out sieges, but the Marathas used asymmetrical tactics, light, agile units built for rapid hit-and-retreat ambush, striking from mountainous terrain and vanishing before heavy artillery could rotate. They also expanded their defense to the ocean. These blueprints detail coastal fort defenses and dedicated warship designs. Shivaji realized that protecting his growing resources and securing his coast required a full-time naval force, an advantage the massive land-based Mughal Empire lacked entirely. Expanding warfare to the coastline transformed the Marathas from a local mountain rebellion into a power that controlled both the land and the sea. This diagram shows how they used terrain as a weapon at Pratapgarh. Notice the large Bijapur army in Zone 1. The Marathas lured Afzal Khan's massive, heavily armed force into a narrow, densely forested valley where their numbers became a fatal disadvantage. The leaders agreed to a one-on-one meeting at the summit. Expecting treachery, Shivaji wore armor under his clothes and concealed a small metal weapon called the Wagnak, or tiger claws, inside his hand. During their embrace, he used them to eliminate the physically imposing enemy general. Years later, they targeted the Mughal general Shaista Khan. This diagram maps out a surgical strike. Khan was positioned inside a massive, heavily guarded grid encampment, convinced that his sheer numbers made him completely safe from the smaller rebel force. But under the deep cover of darkness, a highly focused Maratha force slipped right through the defensive perimeter. They breached the general's own quarters. Khan barely escaped out a window, losing his fingers to a sword strike in the process. Both engagements proved that combining intimate terrain knowledge with absolute surprise allows a smaller force to consistently neutralize an enemy many times its size. Funding a growing independent state requires capital. This map tracks a daring economic strike. The Marathas bypassed military targets and rode straight out of the mountains to the wealthy Mughal-controlled port city of Surat. They extracted nearly 10 million rupees in treasure, providing the massive wealth needed to fund and sustain a growing independent state. But they also followed strict orders. While taking the city's wealth, they intentionally spared religious sites and charitable individuals. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb retaliated heavily, forcing Shivaji to sign a harsh treaty and travel to the imperial court. This is the imposing red sandstone gateway of the Agra fort. Here, Shivaji was publicly insulted and placed under strict house arrest deep in enemy territory. This sequence shows how he managed the legendary Agra heist. After feigning illness, he sent out large wicker baskets filled with sweets. Eventually, he and his young son hid inside those very baskets, executing a flawless evasion past the imperial guards. Walking out of the most heavily fortified city in the empire saved his life. News of the escape reached the London Gazette, highlighting a massive lapse in imperial security and cementing Shivaji as a legendary figure to his people. This brings us to 1674, depicted here by the glowing royal crest above the silhouette of Raigad Fort. This marks the moment of his formal coronation. By officially assuming the title Sri Raja Shiva Chhatrapati with full Vedic rights, he drew a line in the sand. He transitioned from a resistance fighter to a recognized sovereign, claiming absolute political legitimacy completely independent of the Mughal emperor. But a newly crowned king has to secure his borders. This map illustrates the Dakshina Digvijaya campaign. Notice the arrows extending far south of the Maratha core, establishing a secondary zone of control. This expansion deliberately engineered the concept of strategic depth. He knew the large Mughal armies would eventually march south in full force, so he secured a massive, distant fallback zone in deliberate anticipation of that invasion. A true tactician secures today's victory, that a mastermind engineers the geography of the empire to absorb the invasions he knows are coming. This diagram summarizes the Maratha Empire's complete architecture, resting on 4 pillars: leveraging the Western Ghats for physical defense, securing the coastline with a navy, mastering tactical superiority against larger armies, and cementing political legitimacy through formal coronation. The physical evidence of this strategy still stands today. Look at these dark stone ruins built high on a fortified plateau. The walls are weathered, but the sheer defensive advantage they provided is still perfectly clear. The foundation of Swaraja is officially set, but building an independent state is one thing, keeping it alive is another. In Part 2, we will see exactly how this mountain architecture withstands the full weight of the 18th century Mughal war machine.